Hello, this is Zahir Alam. Welcome you all on Frankly Speaking. Our today's special edition, we have three guests in our panel today. And first of all, let me introduce them to you. And to my right, General Ronald Baily. He is the commander of the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force and the coordinator, commanding general of humanitarian effort in Bangladesh at the wake of Cedar cyclone and last November 15. To my left, Ambassador James F.Moriarty, U.S. Ambassador in Bangladesh, and Denise Rollins, USAID Mission Director in Bangladesh. Welcome you all on Frankly Speaking. কেমন আছেন?
ভালো আছি আপনি?
আমিও ভালো আছি. Thank you so much for joining us on this show today. Yes. Let's begin with General Baily. I know this is your second visit in Bangladesh, and the last year in the wake of Cyclone Cedar, you visited Bangladesh. Not only visited, you commanded operation, huge humanitarian operation in Bangladesh in the wake of Cyclone Cedar. So what is the purpose of your visit this time in Bangladesh?
Well, first let me say it's a pleasure and honor to be here, but most importantly to be here in Bangladesh to return. I did come briefly for about one day with Lieutenant General Goodman on a short visit, and it was a continuation of our engagement activities and exercise that we had. But my purpose this particular time is in support of what we call a theater security engagement exercise. And it was an exercise also titled Marine Air Ground Task Force Tactical Warfare Simulation. And the simulation was for an earthquake scenario that was held out at the BIPSOC Institute, and where we brought in about 40 of our Marines to set up a simulation. And the Bangladesh government and people brought in civilian military personnel, engineers, non-governmental personnel working in the government agency, and all the service representatives of the military were involved so that we could test out our reaction and response to provide a service, to provide help.
Overall, General Baily, how do you see the disaster management capacity of Bangladesh?
I think it's in great shape, and for several reasons. You look at what has transpired over the years between the U.S. Embassy and USAID in terms of their warning system and in terms of their programs established for evacuation. Those things are the type of things that are critical. But for us on a military perspective is that we have the opportunity to work together and work together hand in hand so that we will gain an appreciation for how each service or force works. And the key for that is what we call interoperability. And when you have interoperability, both services have the opportunity to understand what we call the standard operating procedures of each other. What's important when you have an exercise of that scale is that you understand the priority. And when the priority has been established by the government, then the U.S. Embassy, USAID, we all work in concert together to accomplish the mission.
Close cooperation.
Close cooperation. And that mission is to get food, water supplies, or whatever the necessary things that we need to the people in need.
Okay, Ambassador Moriarty, I think this is your first TV appearance in an interview in Bangladesh. We know that in your many speeches, many remarks, you have been mentioning that the United States is consistently engaged to promote, to help Bangladeshi people in many ways. So first of all, I would like to know what are why the United States so committed? What are the reasons behind to the people of Bangladesh?
The United States is a global power. We have interests throughout the world. Those interests circle around various things, but let's put it this way. Primary among them are democracy, prosperity, and frankly, in this modern age, denying of space to the terrorists. And we look at Bangladesh, a country of 150 million people, a country that's had all sorts of challenges, and yet we see a country that seems to be on the edge, we hope, of becoming a relatively prosperous, moderate, Muslim-majority democracy. And we say that this country can be a powerful example for not only the region, but for the entire world. So we want to see that happen. We want to work with you, do what we can to help Bangladesh as it tries to achieve that very positive future.
But you have always been mentioning in your own way that 3D is most critical, most important thing in this current era. Democracy, development, and denial. You mentioned the denial of space to the terrorists. So how does you relate all these things about the relations between the United States and Bangladesh?
Well, we see in Bangladesh these three issues just totally knitting up. Okay, you have a very moderate form of Islam here. There is not a lot of inherent support to terrorism within this country. But you also have people who have found space, bad guys who have found space, precisely because there has been poverty, considerable poverty in the past here, precisely because there have been spells where the governance has not been all that good. I don't want to sound obsessive here. You know, I don't think that terrorism right now is the biggest problem that faces your country, but it is there. More importantly, I would argue, is over the longer term, making the democracy strong, making this country more and more prosperous. And I think Bangladesh is making good strides on both of those. And if you do that, then over the longer term, the bad guys that my government worries about so much right now are not going to find much space here. The terrorists will find the space denied to them precisely because of a strong democracy, precisely because of the development and the increasing prosperity of the country.
So to your mind, what are the biggest problems facing or encountering Bangladesh right now?
Well, the most immediate question is a successful transition back to elected government, back to a democracy that actually works a little bit better than it has in the past. I think that the parties seem committed to that. The caretakers have laid out a roadmap that makes a lot of sense. We expect that there will be elections by the end of this year, that you will have an elected government at the beginning of next year. And we sincerely hope, and we do believe, that that elected government will actually be a better democracy than has been here in the past.
Well, we'll be back to you, Ambassador. Denise Rollins, I know you're heading the USAID mission in Bangladesh, yes, and recently the embassy announced that the US Congress has passed providing some extra supplemental budget of $75 million. That's right. So what do you think, how will the money be spent? What will be the criteria of spending that money?
Okay. You know, we were really very pleased that Congress recognized the need here in Bangladesh. The resources will be used primarily for rebuilding the cyclone-affected area, particularly reestablishing livelihoods. As you know, most of that was destroyed as a result of the cyclone. And so we're really looking at the fishing industry, reestablishing that, agriculture, providing alternative income-generating activities, food for work, food for cash. We even have programs that are focused on women who are involved in the solar generating program, so that at least that there's some form of electricity that's down in that area.
All these are integrated with the livelihood projects?
They're all integrated with the livelihood projects. We're also doing conservation. We're looking at global climate change. And so there's a program that will be focused on the Sundarbans and working with the communities around the Sundarbans so that they can begin to take ownership and to, you know, obviously what we want to do is decrease the pressures on natural resources. So we're looking at, there's a big component for alternative income generating activities. So that's kind of in a nutshell what we're going to be doing there. But all of this is in conjunction with the government and the people of Bangladesh. Okay. Okay, we don't do anything by ourselves.
So is the 75 million supplemental budget is only designed for the coastal area, or
yes,
it is only for the coastal?
Yes, this is cyclone reconstruction funds. Okay. Now we have our regular budget. Okay. Okay, and that has grown over the past couple of years. In 2007, our budget was about 80 million. We're now at 110. Okay, yearly. So 110 million for 2008, and then that cyclone money is on top of that. So we will continue with the rest of our program, which is, you know, it's maternal and child health, it's education, it's, you know, conservation and environmental protection, it's also, you know, small and medium enterprise development. So we will continue with kind of the broad focus of our program, and then this will be added to it.
Do you think, General Baily, this supplemental budget or extra additional budget will impact immensely to in the process of reconstruction in the affected area?
Well, I will tell you that's outside of my realm, but what I do know is that's the long-term planning. When I come in as military to provide support, it's to provide support for the relief activity. And we always remind people that the U.S. Embassy and USAID are here for the long term. So I can assure you that based upon their experience and expertise and analysis that it would. But my focus is always on the immediate relief in terms of a response to the catastrophe or the needs of the people as identified both by the Embassy, USAID, and the government NGOs. And so we all work in concert together to do that. But to answer you, yes, I think it probably would. But Denise would be more
competent to elaborate on this.
Talk about the
But what are the
long-term
changes you have seen so far after 9 months of Cyclone Cedar?
Well, in terms of the changes, I haven't had a chance to what we call a reconnaissance to go back to the area. But I am in contact with several of military friends, and I say that because when you're working in an environment like we worked during CIDR, you can't help but build a relationship. And I always hearken back to it was started by General Stackpole, and that relationship or response has benefited me and my Marines we came, and I think it's now evolved into a friendship between the Bangladesh government and the U.S. government, and definitely a friendship between many military personnel, because we work so closely together trying to provide and respond to the need of the people. So I have been in contact, and they're telling me that all those things in terms of what Ms. Rollins has spoken about have in fact starting to take hold and take place, and people are excited about those things happening. So that's what I do know.
Thank you. Ambassador Moriarty, I remember that in your Senate hearing you said that you would jealously protect the interest of the United States at your tenure. So I would like to know, what are the interests of the United States in Bangladesh, major interest in Bangladesh? Would you please tell us about that?
Well, I think you know the answer. You were citing it to me earlier. The major U.S. interests here are to see successful democratization, the first D, to see Bangladesh develop rapidly into a much more prosperous country, the second D, and the third D, obviously, is to make sure that Bangladesh does as good a job as possible in denying terrorists access to their territory.
So, you know that we are heading towards an election, and you also mentioned that the world community, including the Bangladeshi people, political parties, caretaker administration, everybody is looking at the and waiting to hold a free and fair election, acceptable election. So, how do the United States observe the situations at this moment that we are heading towards, in which direction?
Well, right now we're very positive. I think that the successful holding of the municipal elections August 4th was a good start. We've seen a very successful voter registration drive occur. The caretaker government seems committed to keeping to its timetable of elections by the end of the year. And I think you're seeing the parties getting ready to participate in those elections. So right now I would say that the scenario looks very positive.
But you know that the one former prime minister is still behind the bar, and one prime minister is abroad for treatment purpose, and you met with her at Washington. So do you think that this will create a level playing field for having a credible or participatory election?
Well, I understand that negotiations are continuing with the prime minister who remains in detention here in Bangladesh. That, of course, is a topic between her party and the caretaker government. We obviously don't get directly involved in that. I think everybody hopes that you will see an election that is participated in broadly and that results in a government that genuinely reflects the aspirations of the Bangladesh people. In other words, they get to choose the leaders they want. And I think you're going to have that this year, and that's very positive.
Well, back to Rollins. We know that USAID has long been involved with the development process of Bangladesh in many fields. So, how do you look at the things that what are the major developmental challenge for Bangladeshi people from USAID?
Well, from a development perspective, obviously, you know, there's the issues of climate change. There's the issues of population growth. Certainly, disasters are a major issue here, and so that factors into, you know, the ambassador's been talking about, you know, trying to find ways to make Bangladesh more prosperous. And so there are a number of challenges, but, you know, you've made a lot of headway. And so it's a matter of, you know, development takes time. It's not overnight. And so it's a matter of staying on course, and certainly when, you know, your new government is in, you know, focusing on those issues in the economy that will allow, you know, more a greater participation by more people, so that you have a more productive.
Let's back to Ambassador Moriarty. I know that you are in Bangladesh for a little while, and you have traveled so many places, including Teknaf, Cox's Bazar, and other areas. And you have always been mentioning that Bangladesh has a bright future, and you're very optimistic about the future of Bangladesh. So what made you so optimistic? What are the reasons behind this optimism?
What I see in Bangladesh is 150 million very talented, hard-working people trying to get ahead. I grew up in a small mill town in Massachusetts, and my first 5 jobs were working each summer in the woolen mills.
Is it your home state?
My home state is Massachusetts. My hometown, 10,000 people. I worked in a woolen mill for my first 5 jobs, and I saw these mills as a way to start getting ahead, to go on to college, to get a better education. I come here to Dhaka. Every morning I drive through Gulshan and I see thousands of people, mostly women, going off to the mills to work every day. And I look and I say, well, I bet you most of those women grew up in the villages. Most of them grew up without too much opportunity for a good education. And now they're going off to the mills, they're working, and they're going to insist that their kids get a better education. And they're going to climb up that ladder. They're going to make sure that their families progress. And frankly, I think I see a country of 150 million people like that. And that's why you're making progress. We're on the periphery. Yeah. You know, you share our ideals of democracy. That's powerful. But it's basically the effort of the 150 million Bangladeshis that gives me immense hope. You have very talented people.
But how do you look at the government's capacity? Are they quite enough to stand by or to support these working people to boost their livelihood and their day-to-day challenges?
Well, the government is making efforts. The government's making clear efforts. At the same time, though, you're seeing areas where the government is perhaps not doing as much as people would like, people step in and they make up the difference. For an American, this is very familiar. You know, we're a country that, to a degree not found in other countries, where we depend on volunteers, where we depend on private effort to help bring our country forward. So I look upon this and I say, that's not a shortcoming of government. That's not what I'm describing. What I'm describing instead is a private sector, a nonprofit sector, individuals who are moving into these gaps and making sure that their society moves forward. That's very admirable.
And the role of international community, how do you look at to support the countries, developing countries like Bangladesh?
That you put it in exactly the right way. It's to support. You know, the international community can't come in here and say, okay, we're going to build this for you. No. Bangladeshis make the decisions, and the international community says, okay, you know, we can help you with that. You know, there's some things we can do. The biggest thing that the United States does for Bangladesh, it provides a relatively open market for trade. You know, Denise has a big, big portfolio here. $150 million a year, which is what it's going to be next year, is a big aid mission by U.S. standards. But I'll tell you, compared to the $3.5 to $4 billion of trade of exports from Bangladesh to the U.S., it's nothing.
Yeah.
That $3.5 to $4 billion in exports That's helping thousands, scores of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people every year.
But what are the biggest, Ambassador, what are the biggest issues between the United States and Bangladesh? You know, we are hoping, we're expecting that Bangladesh would have a greater access in the U.S. market in terms of duty-free and quota-free access in the U.S. market. So is there any development on this issue?
Well, that's an issue that's being discussed in Congress right now, and I hope to see progress. But I will tell you, it's important to remember that even without these changes in our law, your exports to the United States are growing in double digits, 10 to 20% every year. And that's going to continue, I'm almost absolutely confident.
Well, Denise, I would like to know what are other some, we know some unique projects is underway under the leadership of USAID in Bangladesh, right? Sisimpur projects or Surjer Hashi, like something. So would you please describe something about the projects, what benefits the people are being derived from these projects?
Yes, absolutely. Well, you mentioned Sisimpur.
Yeah.
And Sisimpur is a program, it is based on Sesame Street, which started in the United States back in the 1960s. And what we have done, and actually this is an agency-wide effort, there are Sisimpurs in other countries. Now they're not called Sisimpurs because they're all customized.
Yeah.
And for the country that they're in. For example, before coming to Bangladesh, I was based in South Africa.
Okay.
And they have a program called Takalani Sesame Street.
Different name.
Different name.
Yeah.
And they typically have different characters as well. So
Yeah.
you don't have Big Bird, but you've got Haloon, okay?
Okay.
Because, yes. So, and in South Africa, for example, which has a very big problem with HIV/AIDS, we introduced the first HIV/AIDS Muppet. And so that Muppet is now a part of Takalani Sesame. Here we make sure we have the tiger, we have the little girl who's going to school. That's
Yeah.
critically important because it's important to make sure that girls get educated in the country. So Takalani, Sisimpur is the program here. It reaches 7.5 million kids. And as you know, the focus is on early childhood learning. And what we want to do, and because we've seen this in other countries, particularly in the States, when you get kids interested in learning at the very beginning,
Yeah.
so instead of waiting until they're 5, 6, 7 years old, you start them out when they're 1, 2 years old. You help them learn numbers, you help them learn the alphabet in Bangla, because this program is in Bangla, and you get them excited about learning so that when they get into school, they're ready. We call it, reading readiness, math readiness, etc. And so that's what we're doing. And that program ties in, we're focused, USAID is focused on early childhood learning. But it ties in with a larger program that's funded by the other development partners and the government. And so that's focused on the primary education.
Yeah.
So the kids that we're working with in 1,800 schools in the country, what we're doing is getting them ready so they go into the primary.
Spread it all over the country.
All over the country. Okay. And in that way, they're ready for school. And then hopefully we can work on ways to keep them in school till they at least complete the sixth.
To check dropout.
6th grade. Yeah, there's high dropout rates. You get, in terms of enrollment rates, it's roughly in the 90%,
Okay.
and it's about equal between boys and girls. But then when you get to the 2nd grade and the 3rd grade, then you begin to get a high departure rate, and that's what we want to guard against. Because education is critically important if you're going to grow the economy. You want people to be more active, economically involved. In addition to that, the primary education, the early childhood education program, we have the Blue Star program, which is a program that works with pharmacies throughout the country. It's about 5,000 outlets, and that provides it provides commodities. When I say commodities, it can be health products, it can be things like paracetamol, it can be family planning products. There are other products that these pharmacies sell. Many of them are provided through a company that we founded about 25 years ago called the Social Marketing Company. And you'll see their commercial, they're on television as well. We also I think the Smiling Sun clinics are an excellent example of the work that we're doing throughout the country.
That is called Surjer Hashi.
Pardon?
Surjer Hashi, Bangladesh, in Bangla.
Oh, is that the name? Smiling Sun?
Smiling Sun.
Okay, I didn't realize that.
Well,
but you see that big smiling sun around the country. We have about 380 clinics, but then we reach out to over 4,000 satellites. And so we are providing basic healthcare services throughout the country as a result of Smiling Sun.
Well, Ambassador Moriarty, you know, the general election in Bangladesh scheduled to be held at sometime at the end of this year, third week of December, and the president election of the United States is also scheduled to be held on November 3rd. Well, so do you see there will have any major changes of U.S. policies towards Bangladesh after the election time? New governments, when new governments comes in power?
I doubt it. You know, I think in general, U.S. interests don't change very much, even if the administration changes. There are specific issues that a new administration might look at and say, well, here's where I'm going to change my foreign policy, put my stamp on foreign policy. The new president will sometimes say, no, I'm not sure that the previous administration was doing that issue right. But by and large, the new administration coming in will look at the problems facing the United States and say, what are the logical solutions? And I think as a new administration looks at Bangladesh, it will come to the conclusion, maybe they won't use the same words that I use, but it will come to the conclusion that we want to see a democratic Bangladesh, that we want to see an increasingly prosperous Bangladesh, because that protects U.S. interests. And an increasingly large trade partner is in the U.S. interests. A democracy that's politically stable is in the U.S. interests. And finally, that third D. You know, no U.S. administration is going to be able to turn a blind eye to terrorism in the future. And so they're going to have to look at all countries, and of course Bangladesh is one of the countries, to say, okay, you've got to address terrorism, we want to help you address that issue. So I don't see a fundamental change.
Not very major changes will happen. Well, you know that we have been passing through a transitional time, and there have been a huge anti-corruption drive all over the country. So in terms of anti-corruption drive, in terms of human rights scenario in Bangladesh, do you observe any significant changes right now comparing to previous time?
Well, I think the anti-corruption drive is to be welcomed. It's trying to tackle a very serious issue in the country. I think it's Transparency International that has said for 4 consecutive years that Bangladesh was the most corrupt country on the face of the earth. You can argue with figures, and you can say, well, why isn't this country considered more corrupt? But basically, I think that they were genuinely trying to say that there's a serious issue here. I think the caretaker government's anti-corruption drive was a serious attempt to try and address it. Now you will get an elected government in January, and I expect that government to carry forward the effort, and with a broader mandate from the people to address the corruption issue. So I'm encouraged on that score.
Well, in terms of human rights?
Human rights, excuse me, I should have addressed that directly. Human rights is something that I think Bangladeshis attach tremendous importance to. The United States frequently gets accused of sort of running off on a tangent here and pushing issues that embarrass governments, embarrass peoples. I don't think that's the case at all. I talk to a lot of Bangladeshis who understand the importance of the individual, who understand the importance of rule of law. Have I seen some progress? Yes. Is there still cause for concern here? Yes. And it's not a cause for concern for the U.S., it's a cause for concern for the people of Bangladesh. So on that score too, I am encouraged. I think the people of Bangladesh are going to insist on more progress. You're seeing the creation of a National Human Rights Council. I expect that council to increasingly become a focus of Bangladesh's own efforts to improve its human rights situation.
there are a human truth and accountability commission in Bangladesh. Do you have any remarks on that?
No.
No. Okay. General Baily, how do you see any further prospect of expanding our collaboration, civil military or military between the two countries?
I definitely do, and you know, that's all part of the big broad plan from Pacific Command with the U.S. Embassy. What I will share with you is that my arrival here was an unfortunate circumstance in terms of sitter, but what happened after getting here is what made a difference, and I say that because with the cooperation of the U.S. Embassy, USAID, and Armed Forces Division, not one loss of life occurred after we got engaged in the post-sitter recovery, at least relief effort. And so I bring that point out to say that since leaving, how we conducted affairs here has become the model of HADR operations. I've shared that all across to many military schools, and also to general officers courses in the military. And so I can assure you that because of how we performed, or at least conducted our activity here, there will be more future engagement and activity in this area, because people are looking to us to say, okay, how did you do it and what happened? I had first-hand experience, as I said earlier, in Burma, and it was completely different. And, but we learn from that. So across a very broad spectrum in the dental and the medical, and then exercises like we just finished today with scenarios of earthquakes and other environmental natural disasters is what I see in the future. And I think it's a very bright future, because as a nation, the Bangladesh government, military, and the U.S. government, its military, will have a better understanding as we continue to work these exercises.
Well, Ambassador Moriarty, in terms of fighting poverty, you know that if you compare the impact from the cyclone that hit Bangladesh and the recent one that hit our neighboring country, Myanmar, the disparity is enormous, huge, the intensity, the degree of devastation. Well, do you think that there are some reasons for this disparity in terms of fighting?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think Bangladesh was much better prepared, and I think it also followed up much better. I've been down to the sitter-affected regions, and you did have embankments built. I talked to the survivors of sitter, and they all said they were warned in advance. Some people will also cite the environment down there. You did have the Sundarbans continuing to exist, so you had the mangrove forests mitigating the disaster to somewhat. I understand that in the Irrawaddy Delta that the forests don't exist anymore. And then the follow-on was very important. Nobody knows for sure how many people in Burma died as a result of the initial impact. Nobody knows for sure how many died subsequently. But as the government of Bangladesh is very proud to say, and as General Baily has just repeated, after the initial impact of the cyclone, nobody in Bangladesh died. And that's a very, very impressive record.
Yeah. Rollins, you have been in Bangladesh for 3 years?
No, 1 year.
Oh, 1 year. Well, so how did you find the Bangladeshi people? As Ambassador Moriarty, that there is huge, enormous potential he discovered among the Bangladeshi people. How did you look at that?
Oh, you know, the Bangladeshi people are resilient. That's one thing you can say. And, you know, we obviously feel the same way as the ambassador does over at USAID. There's tremendous potential here. And it's a matter of unleashing the potential of the Bangladeshi people so that they can, you know, be very, very productive members of your society and economy. On a personal level, I've loved it.
Yeah.
It has been very easy to, this is my first time in Asia, and because I've spent the last 15 years in Africa, but it was a very easy transition. And I was welcomed very warmly. I've been taken into, the homes of many Bangladeshis, and I've established very strong relationships. So it's been a wonderful assignment here. So I have a couple more years, and I look forward to
yes.
Bangladesh.
Ambassador Moriarty, the question of emergency in Bangladesh is widely discussed issue, and the one local government election was held under emergency, and the political party is demanding immediate withdrawal of emergency, and somebody has already convincingly they said they will not take part in the election under emergency rule. So what is the United States position on emergency?
Oh, you're asking me to repeat what I've said several times, which is we think that it would be much better to have an election held without a state of emergency. We worry that an election held under the state of emergency will be attacked for not giving the candidates the ability to campaign freely, not giving the voters the ability to select their favorite candidate freely. I'm not saying that those charges would necessarily be valid, but I am saying that I fear that those charges would be made if the election were held under a state of emergency. In other words, what I'm saying is that an election without a state of emergency would obviously be more credible.
More credible. But what will be your position under emergency? Would you send observer to observe the election?
Oh, we are sending observers to witness this election. We think it's very important, and we want to do everything we can to help Bangladesh hold as free, fair, and credible an election as possible.
But one more thing that the Bangladesh government is dealing with, there has been a lot of concern about the extremism, the terrorism problem, and it's not only problem for Bangladesh. This is a global menace, and everybody is fighting this dangerous things. So, and you once mentioned that this is not a biggest problem for Bangladesh, and it is an imported ideology here rather than other countries. So, how do you see the capacity or strength of Bangladesh government and as a whole society are dealing with this menacing problem?
Well, first of all, I will backtrack a little bit. I don't want to downplay the problem at all. It is a serious issue here in Bangladesh. I think the government has made a lot of progress in some areas, particularly with respect to the efforts after the bombing campaign in 2005. I think that terrorist organization, the JMB, has been largely rolled up. But obviously there are other problems out there. You do have pretty convincing evidence that terrorists from Bangladesh participated in the Hyderabad bombings last year. You do have evidence of Bangladeshis being recruited for terrorism. But
this convincing evidence has been produced by the Indian government or somebody else?
By the Indians, but we have no reason to doubt it. The Indians make accusations about Jaipur. We don't have absolute proof of that yet, but we haven't dismissed them either. We do find Bangladeshis going places where they should not, and we do suspect strongly that outside terrorist groups that should not be here do have friends that they're working with inside Bangladesh. So I think the government of Bangladesh has made serious efforts, has made serious progress, and I hope that they will continue to do so, and my government will work with them to the extent that we can.
General, do you have any general remarks on that global war against terror?
Well, you didn't ask me what I thought about living here in Bangladesh, but
Ambassador, you met one former prime minister in Washington. There has been a press report, and but do you see any prospect of meeting other former prime minister after her release?
Well, after her release, certainly, I hope that will happen. And but that's a question to be settled between the government and herself and her party.
What do you expect from the next government if the election would be held in within the stipulated or time frame? What do you expect from the next government in Bangladesh?
What I hope is you'll see a government that will continue to try and strengthen democracy. No democracy is perfect. The U.S. has been working at it, whatever it is now, 230 years or something, and we're still a ways from perfecting our democracy. And I am encouraged by the fact that most politicians I talk to recognize that there still remains work to be done. Part of it is building a democracy where everybody feels they have a role, everybody has a stake, where the parties work together to build a better Bangladesh. Partisan differences are okay, that's expected, but I'm hoping that you will see a democracy that is stronger and where the parties work together for the betterment of all the people of Bangladesh.
Well, we're almost at the end of our program. Denise, I'd like to know that what programs or what actions you are planning for Bangladesh in the days to come?
Mm-hmm. Well, the major activity that we're involved in now is the cyclone relief, and that's that's front and center on our agenda. And that, as I said, $75 million, which is a lot of money to have to move. So that's probably the most important thing.
In how many years the money will be spent?
Well, the money comes in tranches, so we're getting $25 million this year, $50 million next year.
Okay. So, General Baily, your last comment about your Bangladesh visit, about the partnership, about the friendship between the two countries, civil, military, and every aspect of life.
Yes.
What's your last comment about?
Well, I will share this with you today. As I said, it was the first opportunity of civil military working together. And I remember once I was working at the Council on Foreign Relations in New York, and several CEOs and businessmen would come, and for them to come and spend hours there, meaning that they were missing out on, their salary during their day-to-day activity. And I said, well, why do you come? He said, because we care. And that was the response I got from your civil military leaders today. We're here because we care. And that says a tremendous amount about the people and their concern for helping everyone be ready and able to respond if there is a natural disaster of some sort. So I walk away from this experience today, one, refreshed, fulfilled, and very, very proud of the progress and concern that not only the people, but the military and the government is expressed in trying to do a better job or be better prepared the next time something occurs. That in itself makes me feel very good, very proud.
Ambassador, what do you plan for to achieve in your tenure in Bangladesh?
Well, I hope that by the time I leave here in 3 years, I will see a democracy that is solidly established. I will see an economy that's growing 7 to 10% a year.
7 to 10%.
Instead of 5 to 7%.
Is it a dream now?
No, I think it's very doable.
Achievable.
I think it's very doable. You have a few bottlenecks that can easily be overcome, and people will cite energy, people will cite transport. I think those are things that an elected government can address, and I hope they will. And if they do, I'm confident by the time I leave here, I'll see an economy that's growing 7 to 10% a year.
But when you will feel us as qualified for the Millennium Challenge Account Fund?
Well, that requires two things. It requires progress on corruption. We'll get back to the corruption question. There has to be progress on that. And the other one I will also let you know is progress on some economic policies with respect to investment and trade. I think all three of those are very doable.
Thank you very much, Denise,
for
joining us. Ambassador, thank you very much, and General Baily. Thank you so much for joining us on Frankly Speaking, this special edition.
Thank you.
Dear viewers, that's it for today, and we invite you to watch our next episode. Until then, do take care, and bye-bye.